Jaja of Opobo was born a slave. In spite of this humble start, he grew up to become one of the greatest kings in African history. He successfully fought against the slave trade, built a great kingdom, and single-handedly defied the mighty British Empire. But how exactly did he accomplish all these feats? Let us find out today in this channel as we bring you the incredible story of Jaja of Opobo. Jaja was not born a king, but he became one. This is the story of a man who fought against slavery, built a prosperous kingdom, and challenged the British Empire. Get ready for an inspiring tale of courage and determination. The year was 1821 when Jaja, later to be known as King Jaja of Opobo, was born a slave on the West African coast in a small village called Opobo. From the moment he was born, Jaja knew that his life would be tough. Not only was he a slave, but his master was a cruel and merciless man who subjected his slaves to terrible punishments if they disobeyed him or failed to meet his expectations. To make matters worse, Jaja's parents were separated during one of his master's raids, leaving young Jaja without a mother's love and guidance. But despite the hardships he faced, Jaja was a bright and curious child who was determined to make something of himself. He learned to read and write in secret, and he would often sneak out of his master's house to explore the world around him. One day, Jaja heard about a neighboring kingdom called Boni, which was known for its wealth and prosperity. So he decided to run away and see if he could make a better life for himself there. However, as soon as he arrived in Boni, Jaja realized that it was not the paradise he had imagined. The streets were dirty and crowded, and there were plenty of people living in poverty. Disappointed but not defeated, Jaja decided to try his luck in the nearby kingdom of Brass. This time, though, he had a plan. Before he left Boni, he had befriended a wealthy merchant named Defied, who specialized in trading cowries, a type of seashell that was used as currency in the region. Jaja figured that if he could impress Defied, he might be willing to take Jaja under his wing and help him get started in the trading business. And so it was. Defied was impressed by Jaja's intelligence and charisma, and he agreed to teach him the ropes of the trade. Under Defiad's mentorship, Jaja quickly learned the ins and outs of the cowrie trade, and he soon became one of the most successful merchants in Brass. But Jaja's ambition didn't stop there. He wanted to make an even bigger impact on the world. And so he set his sights on the most valuable commodity of all, palm oil. At the time, European demand for palm oil was growing rapidly, and Jaja saw an opportunity to strike it big. However, the palm oil trade was already dominated by rival kingdoms, and Jaja knew that he would have to fight tooth and nail to make a dent in the market. But he was up for the challenge. Using his knowledge of the region and his natural leadership skills, Jaja put together a fleet of boats and hired a crew of sailors. He then set sail for the remote jungles of the Niger Delta, where he bought palm oil from local villagers in exchange for cowrie shells. Once he had enough oil to make a profit, Jaja sailed back to Brass and sold his cargo for a handsome price. With his newfound wealth, Jaja expanded his fleet and his empire, and he soon became one of the richest men in the region. Meanwhile, the British had been watching Jaja's rise to power with growing concern. They had been trying to suppress the slave trade in the area, and Jaja's success threatened to undermine their efforts. As tensions between Jaja and the British grew, it became clear that a confrontation was inevitable. As Jaja's empire grew, so did his responsibilities. He had to deal with rival kingdoms, manage his vast fortune, defend his people from the ever-present threat of the slave trade. But Jaja was up to the task. He was a natural leader who inspired loyalty and obedience in those around him. He was also a brilliant strategist and tactician who was always able to outmaneuver his enemies. Jaja also understood the importance of diplomacy, and he was skilled at negotiating with both Europeans and Africans. He knew that he couldn't defeat the British military, so he focused on building alliances with other kingdoms to form a united front against them. Despite facing many challenges and setbacks, Jaja's determination and resilience never wavered. He was a true champion of his people, and he dedicated his life to making their lives better. The British, meanwhile, were growing increasingly frustrated with Jaja's success. They had outlawed the slave trade and seen Jaja's wealth and power as a direct challenge to their authority. Determined to put an end to Jaja's reign, the British began to build a naval base near Opobo in an attempt to control the palm oil trade. Jaja, however, was not one to back down in the face of adversity. He rallied his people and prepared to fight back. But the British were prepared, and they attacked Opobo with a well-trained and equipped military force. Jaja and his men fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Eventually, Jaja was forced to flee into the swamps of the Niger Delta. There he regrouped and continued to resist the British from the shadows. But the damage had been done. The British had taken control of Opobo and Jaja's empire was in ruins. In exile, Jaja spent his remaining days traveling round West Africa, meeting with other leaders and planning a comeback. Unfortunately, he never got the chance. He died in 1891 at the age of 70, having lived a life of adventure, intrigue and hardship. Jaja's death was a major blow to his followers, but his legacy lived on. His story inspired generations of West Africans to resist colonial oppression and fight for independence. Today, he is remembered as a hero and a martyr, a man who gave his life for the freedom of his people. Jaja's story is an important reminder of the human cost of imperialism. It shows how ordinary people like Jaja were affected by the scramble for Africa and the wider world. It also highlights the bravery and determination of those who resisted colonial rule and fought for independence. But why should we care about Jaja's story today? Why does the tale of a forgotten king from a distant past matter to us now? The answer is simple. Because Jaja's story is a story about hope. It's a story about an ordinary man who rose to become an extraordinary leader. It's a story about courage and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. Jaja was born into slavery, but he never let that define him. He escaped his chains and went on to build an empire that spanned the entire Niger Delta. He was a champion of his people, and he used his power and influence to protect them from the evils of the slave trade. Jaja was also a visionary leader who saw the potential of his people and his country. He knew that Opobo was destined to be a great city, and he worked tirelessly to make that vision a reality. Despite the odds being stacked against him, Jaja never gave up on his dreams for himself or his people. And in doing so, he inspired those around him to be their best selves and to strive for greatness. If we can learn anything from Jaja's story, it's that no matter what obstacles we may face in life, we should never give up on our dreams. We should never let our circumstances define us. We should always strive to be the best versions of ourselves. In conclusion, the story of King Jaja of Opobo is one of courage, determination and hope. He was a true African king who fought for the freedom and prosperity of his people. And although he ultimately lost his battle against the British Empire, his legacy continues to inspire people around the world today. If you enjoyed learning about the incredible life of this legendary monarch, please don't hesitate to show your support for more historical tales. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time. Until next time. Stay curious and keep exploring the rich tapestry of our world's history.